Welcome back, everyone. Assuming you have found us by opening up the new session. This is our last session for the conference, and we're glad that you're still with us. And of course, this is kind of the funnel, the culmination of the sessions we've had up until now. And we have invited folks that represent each of the previous 5 categories as we've described them in this effort to develop, accelerate, work towards treatment interventions, novel innovations for treating chronic spinal cord injury. And so I'd like to first go around. I think it's important for each of you to introduce yourself as that representative category and then speak a little bit to who you are, where you are, and then we'll get into the conversation from there. So, Becca, why don't you start?
Great, thanks. My name is Becca Martin, and I am a clinician. I'm sort of representing the clinical arm. I'm an occupational therapist by background, and then second hat is as a researcher, where I study neuromodulation and electrical stimulation.
Great. Joanna?
Hi, my name is Joanna Stanicka. I'm a CEO of Exonis Therapeutics. I represent industry here, but I am a very driven and an excited scientist in core.
Excellent. Corinne? Folks have already seen you, but you might as well.
Yeah, so Corinne from the Netherlands and from the Paralysis Foundation. So I guess I represent SCI people and also funders to some extent.
Okay. Murray.
Hey, I'm Murray Blackmore. I'm a professor at Marquette University, and I represent kind of the basic research arm here. So I work in animals, and I'm trying to discover the next treatment, the next thing that's going to help.
Okay, and last but not least, the face you saw yesterday, John.
Thank you, Matthew. John Reilly. I represent the Jack Jablonski Foundation. We've been around not quite 9 years. We're currently funding spinal neuromodulation research treatment down at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and at UCLA in Reggie Edgerton's lab. That one's a new one. Patient recruitment's just underway. 24 patients in an upper limb gripping function recovery study.
Okay. So my first question before we get to sort of kick off the conversation, even related to that introduction of who you are, if you can, and it doesn't have to be all of you answering because I think we'll get to it through the conversation, but if any of you can describe kind of a, what's your definition of success? What's your win? And what's a practical one? You know, like what do you have to win this next season or this next year? What's a win for you this year? And then what's your big win? What's the driver behind, you know, Joanna, you mentioned, I'm passionate and driven, where are those two things for each of you, if you can comment?
Well, I'll go. A win is clinical translation of a meaningful recovery treatment. We certainly appreciate progress in the lab, but the meaningful outcome to have it available to the broader population is really the only success that matters if you wake up every morning and remember you are paralyzed.
The win for Exonis next year and for our research would be to show recovery in a large mammal model. We're at the rodent level right now. I think that's important for us. A long-term goal is obviously delivery of a drug to a market that can improve quality of life for spinal cord injury patients.
Thanks.
So I sort of would echo what John said in that the win for me is to be able to stand in front of my patients and say, here's how I'm going to help make things better for you in a real, meaningful, practical way today. That's obviously my long-term goal. We have some shorter term goals that have to do with our research efforts, making sure that we're trying aggressive, novel interventions with our patients on a day-to-day basis in the clinic. Grants, papers, all of those things matter.
And getting those treatments paid for.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And for me, a big success would be to participate in some project on the longer run, establishing some maybe flexible roadmap for a project and getting it respected, stick to the roadmap, because I've been in a wheelchair for 19 years. And I've never really seen any deadline respected. So it would be nice to have a project. Well, I know that we need some flexibility, and that science is not something you can forecast and you can put deadlines upon. But a little bit more of control would be nice, and more results. So whatever functional improvement is welcome, even if it's small.
All right, I've got some connectivity issues, but I think that leads me. I'm going to give 3 quick answers, kind of stratified. I mean, there's the ultimate win, right? So the ultimate win is that a person with a chronic spinal cord injury can go to the clinic, and depending on the details of their injury, they're going to get a set of treatments that will restore them to near normal function, to somewhere that approximates where they were before the injury. My mom had a spinal cord injury. I kind of saw up close what that looks like. I sort of have a personal hatred for it. So one way to frame that is, you know, my ultimate win is to just get rid of the injury's horrible effects, like just wipe it off the planet. And I think we all share that. Like that's all where we start. I think so. For me as a researcher, there's kind of an intermediate win. It's pretty obvious to me that what that's going to look like in the clinic is people are going to get some form of neuromodulation. They're going to get smart rehab. They're going to get some sort of scaffold that gets put into the injury site to allow some kind of reconnection. And they're going to get something to stimulate some growth of nerve fibers. And so it's that 4th category that I've sort of focused my research on. So my sort of career win would be a tube that I would hand to a neurosurgeon, that the neurosurgeon would put into a spinal cord injured person, that would induce enough regrowth that it could work well with those other 3 things to, to make a difference. That would be my career win. And then sort of my, this year, next year win would be expanding the set of genes that can do that, what I just said, in a mouse. That's kind of what we do. We try to come up with the next pro-growth gene, put it into an animal, and see if it behaves. That went long, but that's how I think of my goals. Is Matthew coming back?
Matthew?
The teacher left the room. We can talk about whatever we want.
Sorry about that. I just had a panic attack. Don't know what happened. Dropped out. Lost y'all. Lost everything. I'm assuming Murray finished his answer, and it was lovely and eloquent and provocative.
No, I'm just getting started. So no, I'm kidding. I went on and on.
Okay, good. Well, listen, there's a couple things. One, just to give everybody a little brief context. So I don't want this to sort of be like a middle of a conversation, that you've popped in on, but it is a little bit that way. So most of the folks on this call or on this panel are part of a group that we've put together over the last, really it's been a project developing over a good year, but we've put together this kind of translational work group or think tank or work tank. We're not just, I just want to think about stuff. We actually want to address, when Corinne talked about this flexible roadmap or this targeting of endpoint targets, this group together has been working on that, with the exception of Joanna. We haven't introduced a regular person from industry as of yet. So we have had a number of conversations, and we had one conversation leading up to this one today to sort of talk through what we might discuss. And I want to reference, Joanna, you mentioned something on that first call where we talked about this panel that I thought was really interesting and really got us all talking, which was, and maybe you should just launch into it yourself. You basically said, I wish there was a place.
Yeah. I wish there was a place where a scientist or a freshly incorporated startup with a promising technology, something very exciting, could go for commercialization support. And I think the more streamlined we could make it, the bigger and the more of a blueprint this would be, the bigger chances, we're increasing chances of success and also of a right pace to be developing these technologies. So this could include help with design of the next key milestone proof of concept experiments, support for large mammal models to verify the quality of the science, fundraising, non-dilutive funding, connections to investors. Who is interested in this space? It's such a big question for me when I go and talk to people. Maybe half of them I should never even go to in terms of investors, because they never invest.
Do you want to explain that for people who may not be familiar with non-dilutive funding?
It's a grant funding, basically, that does not take a stock of the company to get certain things tested, to get certain things started. And, you know, spinal research in animals, and then we know that we need animals, is expensive. You know, getting funding for one thing, then you suddenly opening 10 other paradigms. Okay, so acute is cheaper. How do we do chronic? That's even more money needed. And then you've got cervical, thoracic, and it accumulates to serious numbers. So if there was a way of providing a blueprint of what do you do when you have something exciting, and a sort of a source of resources for that person. Okay, so what about the regulatory strategy? What about IP? Scientists may not know about that. I mean, it took me months to figure this all out. And we have great advisors in Exonis, but you know, it just takes time to figure these things out. And every time there's an exciting scientist, as let's say Maire will come up with another target, where does he take it? It's gonna be another 5 years to figure out, what do I do with this from the point of when he already knows that this is potentially really good. So it's just a couple of questions, really no answers, but I think it's something that it would be really worth to properly think about.
So fantastic. I want to hear from the rest of you, because I think what was so great about your comment, and even just the way you reiterated it right now, is that it's like everybody's like, where's the book? Where's the place? Where's the shop? And you all had a version of that. Like, well, Murray, Corinne, John, Becca, it was all like, well, yeah, I'm a clinician. I want to know what's being discovered or what's possible or what could be a treatment. Murray, it's like, I have this thing that I discovered. I don't know. So go ahead, each of you, whoever wants to pipe up first, comment on that.
Yeah, maybe I'll start just because it sort of starts in the lab and then moves out into the world. Could not agree more with the need for that resource. And let me just put some meat on the bones. Like, let's make it specific. Right now in the lab, we've got something in the tube, right? It's this mixture of 2 genes, and we know that it makes axons sprout better in a mouse. That's what we've got. Cool. There's so much I don't know. Right now, it's in a particular flavor of virus. I have no idea what IP, what intellectual property looks like for that. One of the 2 genes is protected, the other one isn't. So what does that mean? Does that mean I'm dead in the water? I have no idea. These are questions that are really going to matter. More concretely, what's my next experiment? Do I stay in a rodent? What do I need to do in the rodent to make this interesting for the next step? Do I need to go into a large animal? If so, which one? And how do I think about de-risking this technology for eventual venture capital, et cetera, et cetera? So, and none of this is abstract. Like, it's sitting in the lab. Like, what do I do next week? What do I do next month? to give it the best possible shot? I don't know, and I don't know where to go to get those answers. So wouldn't it be awesome if we had something?
John, Corinne, Becca, your take on that same?
Matthew, I appreciate Murray's perspective. And in the previous conversation you referenced, we were talking about time and the necessity of a goal, including the time element. And I think Murray pointed out an important distinction. And if you think about a linear progression of the development of an innovative idea in somebody's brain all the way to the clinic, that basic science, that applied science, those early clinical and later clinical stages, I think this idea of time is different, and the goal statement needs to be different depending on where you're perhaps in a more discovery phase, like what I think Murray just described. It's a different kind of getting the science right. And when you move into the earlier mid-clinical stage, with that said, the idea, maybe what Joanna is describing, there's two very different phases of the work, and they need different kinds of resources, different kinds of approaches. And perhaps in paralysis recovery, that second phase where it's moving into multiple iterations of human patient trials, that's relatively new, and it maybe explains why there's no system in place. There's no capacity built up around, well, what do we do with that? Because this field hasn't had it before. I don't know. That's my speculation. I'm new to it. I arrived a few years ago. It still startles me sometimes that all the things we're asking about aren't here already. That's kind of my expectation coming in is, who knows what to do? I'll get behind it and lean in. But I wonder if Murray might agree, or Joanna might agree, that the needs for that kind of knowledge resource and capacity that includes financial resource is different whether you're in the discovery and development of the idea phase. And when you start to move to the bring it to scale phase, which is really what I would say is happening when you're in the second or third phase of clinical trials, you're still getting approval, there's still stuff to learn, but it's a different kind of work. And in my opinion, time and money are of a different consideration at that point. You can move faster, you can push harder. You're not looking around in a dark room, not knowing what's there, as you may be in the basic or applied stages, but later on. And so, anyway, I'll stop and let you.
Yeah, what do you both think of that?
Meaningful to you there.
So I think somebody earlier today said that 80% of research sort of sits on a shelf and never goes anywhere. And some of that has got to be related to the issues that Joanna just mentioned, right? That all of these things are missing and that scientists are not schooled in how to do all of these things, nor are clinicians. And so having a resource where it brings all the pieces together, so there is a basic science researcher who says, this is what we're looking at, a clinician who says, yes, that would be meaningful, and then somebody who says, okay, now here's how we get it moving, I think is important. I think there's a second benefit maybe in having scientists and clinicians talk to each other, because if Murray's technology is going to take 5 years to get to my patients, I need to make sure that my patients are doing the right things for the next 5 years, right? So like if they do nothing for 5 years, it is unlikely that Murray's gene therapy is going to be any good to them. And so being able to communicate between scientists and clinicians and then convince the consumer that that is important too, still, always, I think is another sort of second benefit of having all the players together.
That's a really great point. I mean, I know as an advocate for my own son, with clinicians, it's been, I mean, at first it was astonishing to me what they did not know, like what they were not aware of that I was, like, because I'm scouring and listening and connecting, right? But then I realized, like, oh, because there is no place, like they'd have to be crazy driven like me as a parent to do that, and they're not. They're busy enough with their huge, portfolio of patients or what have you. So again, I mean, it's a really great point that you make. Let me just quickly throw in a question from actually from Michael Lane, who asked a question about, the universities have tech transfer offices, helping with patents, helping to do the very thing that you're talking about. But yet there isn't maybe a really strong set of guidelines for how they function. And then let me add just my own, from what I've heard from various people, that those tech transfer offices vary from institution to institution. So like maybe the tech transfer office at Marquette, where you are, Murray, is not as mature, robust, or connected as the one at Yale, that helped strip modders get out to RenetX, right? What's your response to that sort of comment question?
Yeah, two parts. One, I do just want to point out, it's not like basic researchers can't do this. All the big names have done it, right? Corinne, Kaczynski, Zhigong He, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, people, especially the big researchers, they tend to be really driven and brilliant. So they do find ways to get this done. So yeah, people, there are routes to accomplish everything that we're talking about here. I would just say that there's some real inefficiencies in how hard it is for the rest of us to access it. To your specific point, I mean, again, I'm a concrete guy. Let's get specific. Marquette University declined to protect the second gene in this 2-gene cocktail, and I just don't know where that leaves me. Does that mean is it dead in the water? Is there another route? Like, I don't know what to do in a very concrete way. So depending on the tech transfer office, you can, as a researcher, you can just be left. I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard that from other researchers, who told me stories of, well, I brought something to the tech transfer office, and they said, no, not interested. Go away. Go back to the drawing board. And they're like, well, now what do I do? Right. So I'd love to, if anybody has an insight on that in the audience to comment or even here, please do. Corinne, we haven't heard from you in a minute.
Maire, when you say that, many researchers have done it. So I agree. But then they actually put another hat. They put the business hat, and that's what is missing very often. So we need some catalyzers to be put into place, and I think that you need some external factors to actually move and pull things.
Agreed. Yeah. Do we really want our most brilliant scientific minds thinking about patent law and regulation? I would say no, we don't.
Yeah, I think that this is a dilution of a brilliant effort that these basic scientists could be putting in developing further treatments. And also the other thing is, okay, so yes, there is tech transfer offices. It takes about 30 years to develop on average a drug on a really brilliant drug. If we want anything to come any faster, we need to provide some sort of a blueprint or streamline to how we develop, how we assess technologies, where do we fuel the funding, because there's limited amount of money around as well. What's good, what's not good, how do we sieve through this?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's not good to dilute the knowledge so much as well. So I think it's good to that's again a question of leverage. So it has to be built. Indeed, a lot of inefficiency right now, and the knowledge is there, but it's all spread. So some systems should be built. There is also a lot of unclarity regarding the science on various levels. If we speak about the injury models and these kind of things. Regarding funding, well, I guess it depends what you have to offer as well. If grants are needed, how does it come in contradiction with patent, etc.? These are models which still need to be developed, I think.
I think also the context of the science is missing when you just go to like a generic patent office. They don't, you show them your data, but they may not appreciate what it means in the scope of the other work that exists.
I couldn't agree anymore, yeah.
So let me jump to another thing that we did discuss, and I think in some ways I heard it a little bit as a thread through the conversation. Becca, you brought up something that came out of the Spinal Cord Injury 2020 meeting at NIH, and it was related to the use of terminology. There was a lot of discussion. So, little background for those of you who may not know. In 2019, February, there was a meeting organized by National Institutes of Health in DC, and they invited groups of people to talk about the next decade in spinal cord injury research, and they called it a decade of disruption. You know, how can we disrupt things, sort of the conventions, to accelerate, you know, and they had a whole bunch of categories, and one of them was the SCI community, and there were, you know, adaptive devices and technology and regeneration and, you know, all a host of things. But there was a loud theme that I thought came out of the meeting, which was everybody's using the same words, but they mean different things to different people, whether it's the researcher or the community or the clinician or the kind of research or the, you know, translation, you know, et cetera. Becca, can you kind of comment on that? And even how is that at play with the conversation we just had even?
Sure. So for me, translation is a great example, right? So we talk about translational research, and translation in its pure sense means into the next step, into the next stage, into the next model. But if you talk to me as a clinician who works with people, that's something different than Murray, who works with mice and cells, right? So when he talks about translation, he's talking about taking it out of the mice, but that might be, as Joanna mentioned, to a large mammal. Whereas when I talk about translation, I'm talking about how do we take this intervention that we are studying and get it into the clinic and with people. And so I think that becomes an issue when we talk about priorities for translational research in the field as a whole. It's like, well, whose translation do you care about the most? And so where do you go and where do you start and what's important? And so making sure that we're using the same words to mean the same things becomes really important when we define priorities, and therefore where the funding goes and where the effort goes and who carries the patent for what into what.
Yeah, and I think also really critical, and I see some of the comments that have come across, like how critical that is, like when we talk about a tech transfer office or when we talk about the FDA or when we talk about Medicare, like how each of the players are articulating, or each of the players understand what is and isn't, and going on what is and isn't possible, et cetera. That becomes really, really critical.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about when I said introduce myself, and you were like, and get that therapy paid for. And to me, I'm like, well, therapy is paid for, right? Like my neuromodulation intervention, I bill gait training, which is paid for. But then I have to check myself and think, oh, right, not everybody has insurance. Not everybody can get to my clinic. I'm only seeing the people who are there already. So it's that sort of like mismatch between like what I see, what is in front of me all the time, and then this broader community.
Well, I think I meant even more specifically, like, well, you guys have CPT codes, like you have to charge a thing for a thing that's already predefined. And, you know, that's part of the, you know, in the earlier conversation about insurance coverage to Kim and Corinne, you know, like, are you talking to insurance payers? Like that's how you get paid, right? And that's right.
And do I need to worry about charging gait to a Medicare patient that's only going to give me $30 versus charging gait to a Blue Cross patient that's going to get me $300? Like that's different too. And so something I need to think about. And again, a mismatch in the terms and what people are actually meaning.
Any comments from y'all? Corinne, Joanna, John, Murray, language?
I'm going to agree in general terms. I think there's a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding across stakeholders. The translation example, though, I guess, I think that I and scientists, I think when we say translation, we mean, will this thing that we're studying find its way into a human patient eventually? I don't know if there's much confusion over that term. I think there's confusion over whether it is translatable or not. I think that researchers tend to have sort of a hazy view at best about what's practical in the clinic and what isn't. But I don't think it's the case that we'll use the word translation to mean we can go and do a pig with this. No, we mean people. It's can it go the distance or not? I just think we're occasionally wrong about that. We guess wrong because it's a guess at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody else raised, there's been a couple comments here about incubators. And I guess a question for you, Joanna, like, how do you see that working in this space? Is that an option working in this space in spinal cord injury?
Yes.
Harnessing that incubator support. There's a comment from Praxis, the folks up in Vancouver, that's actually what they've developed. So.
Yeah. I actually have participated in the application process. Not yet unknown outcome yet, but we got through the interviews at this point.
Good luck.
Thank you. So yes, I was very excited about that. We have participated in, we're based in Boston, so obviously there's tons of incubators and support as well. And to be honest with you, I've been applying for every single one with various outcomes, but we participated in various incubators and programs at this point, and they have been of huge help. There's no question about that. What they didn't, I guess, provide is the specific spinal cord injury angle. And that they just have no idea. They treat us, we could be I was sitting next to people that were developing apps for phones, So yeah, it was great. I've learned a lot in terms of business angle, but in terms of how specifically we get this particular technology or this field going forward, there is certainly a mismatch there. And it would be just great if that was in a one spot with a very specific knowledge, experience, expertise, basic science, business angle in spinal cord injury, clinical trials, people that have done it. We've done so much already in this field, and that expertise is there. I just feel that maybe it would be nice to connect it all together. So yeah, Praxis would be great, and I'm excited about that.
Okay. Any thoughts from you other folks about this? A question, sort of an accelerant or a support? I know one of the things, when this was discussed a little bit yesterday in the funder session, our group has facilitated a number of conversations with other patient groups, disease groups, condition groups, exploring, how have they navigated this space, from muscular dystrophy to juvenile diabetes to others, cystic fibrosis, like Jay Shepard mentioned. There have been different strategies that each of these groups have applied to really help accelerate and develop treatments. Thoughts?
Yeah, in general, they seem to be, some of them seem to be more, they seem to be further along than we are. So we can ask ourselves why. Is that the role of the community? But they seem to be more advanced and to have put things into place, some enablers, which we don't have yet. We do some progress in that. For example, with the roadmap that was announced yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of gathering the knowledge and putting it there to serve more experiment and more translation, that still needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. So, kind of on a related note, let's also talk about something that we have discussed. And Corinne, you talked about it in your presentation earlier today, this notion of de-risking and whose responsibility, in a sense, it is to de-risk. So let's, throw it out. For instance, Murray has this discovery, this gene or set of gene candidates, and there's a certain level of risk for him to sort of drop everything else that he's doing or invest extra time and, has to teach classes, has to write grants, has to continue his lab. And now he's, well, I've got to go this direction now. That's a certain level of risk. And then Joanna's at a place where she has a certain level of risk. I have to raise money. I have to prove that Murray's thing works. Let's say it's Murray's discovery. And how does de-risking work in this space? How does the Jack Jablonski Foundation look at this? The End Paralysis Foundation look at this question of de-risking? How do we help tilt the road down a little bit?
A lot of the resource discussion that is in play is an important idea. It's how to make the insiders' efforts be more effective. By system improvement, by connecting resources and tools and capacity. And I think it's an important piece. There's a slightly larger circle that can be drawn around this equation. It has to do with the folks who have a lived condition or who care about those folks. That larger participant group may be more watching this recovery research process than participating in it, but certainly every day living with the experience. I mention it because of the risk question and where's the capital going to come from? And in the early stages, it's not going to come from investor capital with a commercial interest. It's just not. You already know it. It's going to come from philanthropic investment. The difference that investment is going to make is not going to be profit return. It's going to be change in condition, a public benefit. And so there's the reason I mentioned this in the context of the resources, that larger group should be more important to raising the amount of capital available. But they don't know about it. They don't have it at any information access. There's no curated knowledge about what's going on. There's a lot of, as we said yesterday, data and information, but not a lot of knowledge for somebody who isn't inside it. And somebody mentioned yesterday, even if you're on the inside, you don't even understand all the information that's out there. My point is that risk equation is different when you're talking about a philanthropic dollar than you're talking about a commercial investment dollar. And the issue isn't we only have this much and how do we make the right decision for it. It's also we need about 10 times as much. And the potential for it exists. That money is there. It's just not being asked for.
Well, and certainly, as John, you and I have talked about this, and U2FP that's one of our strategies. We don't believe the pie is fixed. We have, in the last few years, generated $17.8 million to that question from the public sector at the state level. And that's been a tactical decision to say, look, not only can we
until Matthew comes in, I'm going to respond. There are two big important buckets, three, public and private to separate it. Matthew's describing important work to increase the state government funding, and he's had great success. Federal money may be flat, but the larger public influence on government spending is important, even if it's not individuals who are donors, they are voters, they are citizens. But on the other side of the equation, the private money, there's the endowed fund funders. Nielsen stands out as the biggest example, but it's the charitable gift dollars. That's flat. You look back 10 years, the amount of private charitable gift money coming into this field is flat. And with some of the exciting progress made in the last 10 years, it's kind of shocking. And I don't think the reason it's flat is because the pool of potential money, the prospect pool of donors doesn't exist. It does. I just don't think a compelling and credible case for the gift has been made. And that's the difference that's going to be most important in the early stages of the research process. When you're in the basic science, the early applied science, even the early clinical stage, you really need the philanthropic dollars. Eventually, there's an inflection point you're going to find in the later clinical stages where the commercial dollar will come in. You got to bring it to that point, but eventually that'll take over. But we need to just bring that pool of money up.
If I may,
go ahead, Joanna. Go ahead, Joanna.
I just said I thought brilliant idea, but I'm sure all of you are thinking this, that the more the risking will be done by philanthropic part or the community part in terms of technologies, that will stimulate more investment funding. This is not quite of a growth when you actually are able to de-risk certain technologies. For example, I have been asked to show effects in large mammal models. Okay, so if I put this in, if I collect from non-dilutive funding or various sources, grant funding and other sources, money for this, then I actually will be able to bring big investment funding for clinical trials. So it's not that it's $1 to $1. Sometimes you're spending one, but you can actually bring a lot more money once certain stages of development or the risking of the technology are achieved.
Well, I know I sounded like I froze when I was commenting earlier, so I want to just go back to, the money that's been generated from our state programs. To your point, Joanna, has also generated other investment. So there are from device companies who've donated in kind, upwards of more than $1 million in coming into the state, and then obviously the potential to as an incubator to spin off companies. So it is a growing, it's not just one pie, it actually creates other pies as well. So in a related question, and actually to you, Joanna, I know this is another thing that we've talked about a little bit is, John was just describing, and we've heard others talk about this over the last 3 days, like we just need a win, like we just need something to get across the bridge, right? Well, and maybe you all know I'm a little bit of a skeptic of that sort of like single egg in a single basket. Like, I guess the question I always have is how big does that egg have to be? Like, how big of a win does that win have to be? And how do each of us look at that and measure that? Because I'm a bit skeptical of that sort of strategy. Like, I think we need a lot of wins. I don't think one win is going to just blow the lid off of everything, but I could be wrong.
Nobody thinks
for you. No, I don't mean, I'm oversimplifying, but Joanna, I'm just curious for you with a biotech company, like what is that? How are you thinking about that? How are you measuring that?
It's a difficult question, but I'll dare to argue with you unless you kick me out from the Zoom. So I do agree that one win, solid win, that would actually lead to a drug that you can sell or device that you can sell, and that someone can make money on it, would stimulate a lot more interest in the space. So then we're basically becoming an attractive field to put the money in. So this is what exactly happened with genetic disorders, right? We had the success of everybody thought genetic or gene therapies were crazy many years ago, right? If you think about what people were afraid of and so on, and then suddenly you have a therapy that is making little children survive, and nobody's asking about, okay, so what were the problems that we were thinking about many, many years ago? Clearly it works, right? And suddenly that became such a solid path in the heads of investors for making money that it's like, wow, okay, so this is not crazy anymore. This is very exciting. Look, the therapy is $2.1 million or something. Suddenly then they start calculating the numbers and they're seeing the space as an attractive. So that's basically how that works. So such a win of delivery of a product that you can sell would be enough to make the field a lot more attractive.
This is the reason we're invested in getting something across the FDA goal line. Something. This isn't an either or choice. Think of this as a sequence. Every one of these therapeutic channels of research are different stages away from that. It's not we'll do one and then not the others, but the one that gets across first is going to help pull the others because it's going to bring more commercial and philanthropic interest into the field. I'm going to sidebar here. Philosophers have talked about this idea of the perfect is the enemy of the good for thousands of years. What does that mean? In a practical way, don't wait for the best thing. It never comes. The second best thing comes too late. Go with the third best thing. Neuromodulation is real. That's why we're investing in it, but it's also because it's closest and because it's going to be important to bringing more money into what Joanna's working on and what Murray's working on. And I'll say this, if we don't get that kind of win, it's going to take Joanna and Murray a lot longer to get their ideas closer to the goal line because money does matter. And it doesn't fix it and make everything happen, but if you don't have enough, it sure does slow you down. Tell me I'm wrong. If you don't have enough money, you still go as fast? I doubt it.
There's a great comment from Melissa. One win would give other treatment options a regulatory pathway to follow as well. Another way to de-risk. I mean, that certainly is a strong case for this one win, that you're actually paving a road that other wins can follow. Whereas there's really yet to be that road has not been fully paved yet. So
from a scientific perspective,
Corinne, Murray. Go ahead, Joanna. Go ahead.
From scientific perspective, it also would be great to have a positive control. What do we aim for? What kind of recovery do you need to see in animals to consider this a potentially sufficient recovery in humans? I think that would also just put some sort of a bar onto our experiments. Okay, this is not good enough. No, this is already above the line. So I think this is, from science development perspective, is also important.
The problem is that we still don't know how recovery level in animals does translate into recovery level for humans. That's one of the big difficulties. And then what we've seen in the past is that the bar is not always the same for the community as for investors. That was the case of some clinical trials with Stem Cell Inc., for example, that were stopped because the results were looked at not sufficient for the investors. At least that's what has been communicated. Whereas the community, well, some people in the community would have been happy with the chance that it might have brought, because some people did get better. So, yeah, where to put the bar? It's extremely difficult. And I would tend to agree with John that, of course, some success would bring a positive vibe, and that's always nice. And yes, it would, I think, get some more investments. So I think it's good to have a little bit of focus on what seems to work. I'm fine with that as long as it doesn't take all the focus and all the funding, because that's really too far from well, we have to be more ambitious than that, and maybe we can actually find a simpler path for neuromodulation. Maybe we can speak about those pragmatic approach. So there was a pragmatic clinical trial or something like that. So for me, neuromodulation should already be part. It's already a reality. So let's just do it. And I would say,
go to the clinic and try to get it.
Yeah. So and then looking at Murray, then yes, combine your experiments with neuromodulation, because they can probably add up some level of results. They can improve the results, but still the truth is somewhere else, really. And the only thing that we managed to do so far, apparently, is really barely to touch a little bit of the potential for plasticity. And that's, well, it's really worrying. So we need to find a way to go much, much further in parallel to just tackling the low-hanging fruit, that's a no-brainer for me. But and there are a few biotechs already existing, and yeah, let's hope they can go further and get results as well. But yeah, we will need so much more. So how do we get that breakthrough started?
So Murray, or Becca, any thoughts from your vantage point as to, this question?
Yeah.
And you see some of the comments on the side here. There's some really interesting, both comments and questions.
Shoot, I don't see those, so I'll just fly blind here. I guess I'll say that, John, I hope you're right. God, I hope you're right. If I was in debate mode, I guess I'd make 2 points. Joanna made this analogy to gene therapy. Well, the gene therapy win was a full win, right? These kids are going to live relatively normal lives. Would it have been enough if they'd gotten just a couple more years of life from the gene therapy? Would that have blown things open? Because I think that's a better analogy to what neuromodulation is. It's going to be this small step forward. So this question one, is it a big enough win? What I think is going to happen is that in 3 to 5 years, I hope you're successful and that large numbers of people with spinal cord injuries will get neuromodulation, and it will help them in ways that make them very happy, because I know that little gains are huge gains when they're yours. I get that. Mm-hmm. And at that point, people are going to be looking around saying, now what? Now what? And so I hope what I can be doing in 3 to 5 years is saying, okay, here's the now what. So let's not take our eyes off the next step, because it's going to be here sooner than we think.
I wholly agree. That's exactly the idea we have. And one more thing, those little incremental gains keep a person healthier and more and retain more of the capacity to benefit from the other neuroregeneration and neuroregrowth therapeutics that are promised. But if everything's atrophied, everything has been dormant for decades, the chances of benefit are diminished. Whole generations of folks will lose the opportunity for what's coming next.
Keep the window open.
Thanks.
I agree 100%.
Becca, a comment, and even in particular, if maybe there's a way to comment on, what's even clinically available now that's also being investigated with a slightly different.
Yeah. So I'll answer that in one question. I did want to say too, I think that the general public does not believe that recovery from spinal cord injury is possible. There's not yet been something that they can point to and say, yes, it works. And so when we talk about raising money and going to philanthropic or venture capital, those people don't think that it works. And so the spinal cord injury is too small to raise enough money to move the line, to move anything across the line. Now I'll change topics so that you don't argue with me about that. So clinically, neuromodulation, surface level neuromodulation is available, right? We do it, I do it every day. It is what I study in terms of looking to refine. And, you heard a presentation yesterday about a device that's specific for non-invasive stimulation, and there are lots of them going on right now. We took an off-the-shelf device and it works. And I think sometimes we get real rigid and real narrow in our focus of what is going to work and what do we have available, and nothing we have available is working. So we have to find something new. And that's, you got to develop the device, study the device, fix the device, get the FDA to approve the device, find somebody to manufacture the device. Like, that's a long process. But if we can take what we have and use it in new ways, then we might have an even lower hanging fruit and even more near-term solution. And I think what John just said about keeping people keeping bodies available and viable for recovery is super important and is going to be a major barrier.
Excellent point. Thank you. So unfortunately, we're out of time, but I do want to make sure, I hope that you all will join the discussion post the Zoom meeting if you can. There have been a lot of great comments and questions. I do want to address one sort of thread of them that I see just popping up, and it's that, we've had pretty good success in the state legislature when talking to legislators about the realities of spinal cord injury, not just the like tell your story of what it's like, but how much it costs and how many people are unemployed and what that means to a state's budget for healthcare, what it means to the federal budget. And I'm not kidding when I tell you that legislators' eyes pop out when you explain that, there may be 25,000 people in your state, but they cost this much. And that's staggering to them. And so then these questions about like, well, if you could get return of tricep or grasp and upper extremity, tetraplegia, or the bowel bladder sexual function, for anybody with an SCI, like these kinds of things are hugely significant and have a fiscal impact. Like they pay attention to that. And we've had success in making that case. Not always, but by and large, we've, bipartisan support when we make that case. And make the case that, boy, if you put a little bit of investment in this and you can grease the wheels and change that figure, you've got something here. And so that's been really successful for us. And I think that's the onus is upon us in the community to drive that, because we can tell that story in a way that I don't think anybody else can, personally. So before I keep rambling on, thank you each of you for the conversation. Feel free when you get back to the live stream, look at these comments and questions on the chat in the live stream and go at it. Answer them, comments. I'm sure folks would love to hear from you. There's been a lot of good questions and comments, and my apologies to all the attendees for not being able to get to them all. We're kind of racing to keep up with the conversation. So thank you very much. And we will be following with Reveca and Kelsey.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Matthew.
So this is our last interview with Kelsey and Reveca. And one thing I didn't mention, I think probably everybody knows, Rev, that you've got some, you got some great news not too long ago.
Hello, I'm here.
Hi. You got some great news recently from the Nielsen Foundation Visionary Grant. Maybe you could just briefly talk about that before we get into your video and let everybody know what happened.
Sure, yeah. I was nominated for the Craig Nielsen Visionary Prize earlier, I think in September. And it was to recognize some of my advocacy work and my artwork, and it came with a $1 million prize. So pretty amazing.
Excuse me, what?
Excuse me, yes. $1 million prize.
Win. Nice, excellent. Well, I'm sure you're gonna have plenty to talk about. Let's jump to your video. All right?
Sure.
Here we go.
Hey everybody, we're back with Reveca. I'm so excited to talk with you. How are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. This is exciting, and I am happy to see you over Zoom today.
Yay. So let me just clarify real quick. You just won $1 million. Like, that's
I did. It is a real thing, and I didn't even buy a lottery ticket. It was through the Craig Nielsen Foundation. They awarded me with a visionary prize, Craig Nielsen Visionary Prize, for my advocacy work and my artwork. So that was really exciting.
That's so fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What are you going to do with all of this money?
I don't know. It's overwhelming, and I'm still trying to figure it out. But definitely want to put it to good use and make sure that it keeps the spinal cord injury community moving forward and doing good things. So
that's so cool. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
I feel like such a fangirl right now. I've been just like creeping all over your Instagram, and I love your art. I love what you do. You're doing so many cool things.
Thank you. Like, could say the same for you. I've been following all your accounts for a long time as well.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. It really does. I'm so fascinated by your artwork. It just speaks, I think, so much to, I feel like it just like bleeds who you are as a woman with a disability, as a Latina woman. Like, tell me about sort of like where that comes from and like what inspires you and what conjures up all of these creations.
I would say having things to say and having the, I think one thing that has recently guided me in the past probably 5-7 years was someone asking me, what do you want to tell the world? If you had one thing to tell them, like what do you want to tell them? And so I think that when I work on stuff, I'm like, what do I want people to know from this thing that I'm creating, or something that I'm saying or presenting? So I think that's just, it's a simple question, but I think has been really helpful to sort of help me focus.
And what has that been like over the last few years? Like, what do you want the world to know?
Good question.
I
think it changes, depending on what I'm doing. There's, it changes. But what a lot of the work that I do, I want disability to be seen, to change the image of what people think disability is, and what the human experience and the lived experience of someone with a disability, and changing that. And, I think there's these conceptions, that we are objects of pity or objects of inspiration, and that is not the case. There's a big, wide spectrum of what our lives are, and what the reality and like, authentically what our lives are. And so being able to share that and show that through images, whether it's me or other other artists with disabilities or spinal cord injuries, I think is super important, because we can do that with our art. We can change minds with our art.
Yeah, for sure. What's the Trace Fritas project? I'm so interested in that. Can you tell me about like your role in that and how that came about?
Yeah, I worked on that project with 2 other artists with disabilities, Maire and Tara Ahern, which both are also here in the Chicago area. And we recreated an image of Frida Kahlo, a Mexican painter with a disability. And we swapped the image of her with us in our wheelchairs. And we really wanted that to be, front and center, our chairs, so that people could kind of do a double take and like really see that.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Thank you. After we did that, we really had fun doing it. So we started recreating a whole bunch of other images, and we ended up doing 16 images, including The Last Supper, Rosie the Riveter, John and Yoko on the cover of Rolling Stone, a whole bunch of different ones. They're really cool. 16 images and over 5 years. And we exhibited that last September here in Chicago. Well, not September of 2019.
I know time is so weird right now.
Yeah, the time is strange. So we exhibited that, and then part of what we did, it wasn't just images. So we had like text cards that went along with it and kind of explained each image, why we chose that image and the significance it had for the disability community. And it talked about, some of them talked about body image and accepting our bodies, and some of them were about employment and like sub-minimum wages for people with disabilities, and another one was about interable relationships. And so we really were able to use those images to really educate people and hopefully have them learn a little bit about disability issues.
Right. How long have you been injured?
It's going to be 26 years on New Year's.
26 years. How old were you when you were injured?
13.
Dang, you were so young.
Yeah, I was right about to start high school, like in the middle of 8th grade.
Yeah. Oh, just a little baby.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Were you an artist then? Like, did you?
I think I've been an artist forever. Like, I can't imagine my life not being art or creative or making things. So
yeah. And it's just evolved through the years. You do so many different mediums, like I saw photography and.
Yeah, I really like to try different things and experiment with just new mediums, new things, materials to work with. Like originally I went to school for fashion design and theater, but I really do, like you said, I like to continuously learn new things and see what I can come up with different materials.
Yeah, it's fun to play and see what you can do and what inspires you. And
exactly. For me, it's play. A lot of it is just play and and I do it because I have so much fun doing it. And if it, it eventually has a purpose, but most of it is for play, I think.
Yeah, it's so funny that way, how it starts out as this this playful thing, and then all of a sudden it molds, like the more you dig into it, it becomes something outside of yourself.
Yeah.
And like something bigger, and you can create it into something to have a purpose and a message. And that's really cool. I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing. What is Backbones, and what's your role in that?
Backbones is a nonprofit. I started that in 2009 to provide support for people with spinal cord injuries. Initially, it was to find one-on-one peer support so people could find someone to talk to and relate to and ask questions. And that was for people with SCI, but also family members, because family, parents, siblings, spouses often need that support as well. It sort of has evolved, and now, we do a lot of events in different cities with the same purpose of finding, or to help people find connection and ways of meeting others in a social setting. And this year we have gone virtual like everyone else, and so we've been continuing to do our peer groups online through Zoom. And we also started a leadership program with 10 participants who are going through a year-long leadership development program.
Cool. And it's going really well. I think that's so important. Like, you're in a position to really help people who, especially in those beginning stages post-injury, where you're just like, what is this life? What am I doing? And you're just sort of flailing It seems like it's just so needed, and it's not like out there enough right now.
Yeah, and I think we get, we often get people who will, reach out to us right after injury, but they're almost not ready to talk. And then they kind of disappear for a little bit. And then a year or two after, they come back and they're like, oh, I'm ready now. And I want my community, I want to meet people. And so that makes me really happy when I see people actually come back and get involved.
Right. Because it is hard in the beginning. I remember totally dismissing this as being a possibility, like of it being my life.
Right.
They're just like, I'm not disabled. This is going to go away. And so it makes so much sense that so many people are just like, nope, I'm going to resist that for a while.
Nope, I'm not that.
Yeah. But that's why I think also it's so important to have people like you and all these artists who are out, finding other people with disabilities and putting themselves out there and being seen and just changing the narrative, like you said, and breaking down these stigmas and stereotypes to make real change and just be more seen and normalize what might not be normal to so many people.
Exactly. And creating our new normal.
Right.
I was telling someone recently, we're not going to fit the path of everything that's out there. We have to create our own. And, we're doing it as artists, and, this organization, your organization is doing this by having events like this. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been so great. I'm excited to talk to you again. And congratulations on everything. You're kicking ass and just really exciting. Yeah.
Well, thanks for inviting me on to this. I really appreciate it. And I'd love to join you again sometime.
Awesome.
Thanks, Rev.
No problem.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Good to see you.
Great to have you here. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. See you.
Bye.
So we have come to the end of our session and the end of our symposium. We are so very grateful that you joined us, that you stuck through it, and that you've participated in the ways that you have. I really appreciate the conversations, the comments, the questions, the encouragement, both via email and on the chat board. Very much appreciate all of that. I want to leave you with a few things. First off, my apologies for saying what a seamless experience the event was. And we'll have to make sure it's not a reflection on Event Technology Services. Obviously, this morning with the Chrome servers, and then this afternoon, actually, it's me in the building I'm in and the Wi-Fi. So thanks for sticking with it, with my seamless jinx. The other thing I wanted to mention is please go to the U2FP room and click on our event survey. We will also send it to you in the coming week. Very much need you to fill out that survey. Want to hear from you about the experience of the event and your thoughts and reflections, loved, didn't love, hated, liked, all that stuff. I want to hear from you. Please do that. Also, a few of our board members have reminded me that for those who may not have sort of caught some of the things that U2FP does, I just thought I'd quickly mention. You can certainly see from, if you watch our video, we've got most of our initiatives listed there, but I just wanted you to quickly understand, obviously I've talked about our legislative efforts, our Cure Advocacy Network. You can reach out to Jake Beckstrom to find out more information about that. We're operating in multiple states. We've generated quite a bit of money and included lots of people from the SCI community into the prioritization of research process along with clinicians and researchers. We also have a scientific advisory board that was mentioned earlier that folks, SCI organizations have used to vet research when they don't have the expertise to do so. Also helps to foster a dialogue between those researchers and the SCI foundations. Obviously, we do this symposium every year. We would love you to become involved and engage with that. And as I mentioned before, we do also have, we've started these multiple, sort of think groups, think tanks, work tanks, work groups around activity-based therapy, around neuromodulation strategies, and now also around translation. You can go to our website, u2fp.org, and find out more about our organization. And certainly, as I mentioned earlier, very much would love you to reach out to us at U2FP. You can find our contact info and emails on the website as well. We'd love to hear from you. Love to talk with you, love to help you get engaged or find ways to be engaged and connect even with the organizations that have been presenting today. Lastly, I want to thank our sponsors for helping us to do this. I want to thank our generous presenters and participants for their time and willingness to participate and be engaged. Which leaves me to the last thing, which is before we say goodbye to this, make sure you go to the event lobby. You are more than welcome, any and all of you, to participate in the post-conference Zoom rooms, the networking kind of happy hour room. It is a Saturday afternoon. Also the SCI advocacy and foundation discussion, and then this sort of multiple stakeholder conversation. So please feel free to join them. Love to talk with you there. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here with us over the weekend, and look forward to hearing from you again. Look forward to seeing you hopefully in 2021 at our in-person meeting in Salt Lake City, thanks to the Craig H. Nielsen Rehabilitation Hospital and our supporters and participants then. Be well. Best to all of you. Thank you so much.